The Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty, and joining me this week again, Jeff D.
Hi, folks.
Welcome back. The Atheist Experience is a live weekly call-in television program sponsored by the atheist community of Austin. It's a chance for the public to interact with atheists and for us to provide information and discussion on various topics. The ACA is a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. They have weekly meetings at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road every Sunday at 11:30, except for the third Sunday of the month when we host a lecture series at the Austin History Center located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. In addition to that dinner, there's also a dinner after the program where the cast and crew get together, all those people behind the scenes and other ACA members, and it's a chance to invite some of the viewers down. Anybody who's atheist friendly is welcome to join us at Threadgills on Riverside at Barton Creek. The show runs till 6 o'clock, and we normally get there between 6:30, 6:45, have dinner, a little discussion, finish out the weekend nicely. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio program called The Nonprofits, hosted by the gentleman to my right, Jeff D., co-hosted by Dennis Lubay, and features Russell Glasser and myself. We were live yesterday. The next one will be June 17th. For more information, you can go to nonprofitsradio.com. The audio for the nonprofits, of course, being all audio, is available there as file download or as a podcast. And also for this program, the Atheist Experience, if you go to atheist-experience.com or the ACA's website, www.atheist-community.org, you can download the audio files for this program, and we have a streaming podcast for the Atheist Experience as well, which has brought in a lot of new listeners, a lot of good mail and feedback, which we greatly appreciate. Keep spreading the word, and hello to the listeners out there. If you don't get through on the telephone today, or if you're listening to a recorded or podcast program and you want to contact us, you can email tv@atheist-community.org. Provide us any feedback, suggestions, anything you want. We try to answer as many of those as possible. As the show grows, of course, it may be impossible to get back to all of them, but we'll definitely do our best. The ACA also sponsors a number of social events throughout the week, including a happy hour Thursdays at Ninfa's on Anderson. That begins at 7:30. You can come down for drinks and discussion, dinner, whatever you want. All of this information is available at the website, www.atheist-community.org. You can also contact us by the email address I listed. And a note on calls. For some calls that end up repeating things we've discussed previously in this program or in past programs, we're going to try and give a brief, to-the-point answer and direct people more often to the frequently asked questions portion of the website. A lot of the questions we get over and over again is, why is it you don't believe in God, or, how can you be moral without God, et cetera. And they're really good answers in the frequently asked questions. We're not shirking off those questions. I mean, anybody who calls in and asks, we'll try to give you the best answer we can. And sometimes we'll discuss them in depth. But if you don't feel that you got a complete answer, rather than keep you on the line forever while we keep other people on hold, we'll direct you to the FAQ, and then maybe call back when the lines aren't full, and we'll hit it a little harder. One special announcement for this week: this coming Saturday, the 10th, the ACA will have a booth at the Gay and Lesbian Festival. There's information at our website about that. The festivities start at noon and run till 8 o'clock. We'll be manning the booth throughout the day. For ACA members who would like to participate, you can get more information at the website, and you can also contact Don Baker, who's coordinating this. And I know we're looking for volunteers for various shifts. Come on out, bring some shorts, grab yourself something to drink, and sit out in the booth and support a good cause, which, oddly enough, brings us to what Jeff came to talk about today. So without any further ado, let's hit it. Thank
you, Matt. Everybody who is paying any attention at all to the news knows that big surprise, President Bush has come out in favor of a resolution to amend the Constitution to define marriage as a union between a man and a woman, period. This is news again because it's been talked about forever, but now there's actually going to be a vote this week. The specific amendment that they're going to vote on would prohibit states from recognizing same-sex marriages. To become law, the proposal would need 2/3 support in the Senate and the House, and then would have to be ratified by at least 38 state legislatures. Well, there's no better time than now to bring this thing up again and try to bring folks to their senses. So I took the liberty of going to a site where they had conducted a survey asking those who opposed same-sex marriage to tell them what their main objection was, and they got statistics on what are the primary objections, and they rated them, and I took the top 5, and I'm going to hit them in reverse order. So this is starting with the least cited objection of the top 5 and working up toward the big one. Because we have some things to say about this. Now, first I want to directly address an issue which even we atheists sometimes argue about, which is, how come this is an atheist issue? And the fact is that most of the opposition to same-sex marriage is driven by religions. And whenever religions try to impose their sacred teachings on everybody in the country by way of law, that is when atheists will jump in and object. So here we go. First on the list, it's bad for the kids. If there are legal same-sex marriages, there will be children involved in some of those marriages, either because they're adopted or because they were the children of one of the two partners from a previous heterosexual relationship. 2% of people surveyed who object to same-sex marriage listed this as their primary concern. And yeah, I want to address that too. 2% may not sound like a lot, but this is only 2% of them said this was their main objection. Practically 100% of people that I've spoken to about this subject eventually get around to raising this objection. Now, this can be broken down into 3 basic kinds of problems that these folks think will be caused for kids in whose parents are a married gay couple. The first possibility is that it might make the kids become gay. Now, even setting aside the whole question of whether homosexuality is genetic or the result of nurture, which is the claim that it is significantly the result of upbringing, is far from obvious from the scientific studies of this. Even setting that aside, this concern presumes that being gay is wrong and should be opposed, or the kids should be protected from it, which is really the same argument as the homosexuality is unnatural argument, which we'll get to later in this series of objections.
It also represents a great big fallacy in that, it presumes that it's possible by raising a child you could make them gay. However,
Yep.
those children who grew up to be gay from straight homes, obviously you've got an exception there. I mean, every one of those homosexuals, if it's completely nurture, had to come from some home, and since we're traditionally a straight home, you've got one path there. So obviously straight homes are actually promoting homosexuality.
A fine objection. I didn't go there with my response because those people who make this argument could say, well, what if it only, maybe you've got a X% chance of a child growing up gay from a straight family, and a noticeable, though still small, increase in the odds of that if they're raised by gay parents.
Yeah.
And for them, they consider that still a bad thing.
And
they don't necessarily have to make the claim that the sexual preference of your parents equals the sexual preference of the kids.
And my response to them is always, prove it. Let's find out. Let's allow gay marriage. Let's see what goes on. Let's track it. Let's find out if all these bad things you say will happen actually do happen. Because if you look over, and you'll probably get to it, if you look over at other countries that have allowed it,
they're not falling to pieces.
They're not falling to pieces.
Yeah, but again, I think for my response to this, and we don't need to argue over this, I think you raise a good point. My eyebrow goes up more over the simple inherent bias in the idea that it would be bad for kids because it might make them gay, the bias is that being gay is somehow itself a terrible, horrible thing that kids need to be protected from. And that is just not at all obvious.
Matter of fact, you could make the argument that the only way you could say that it's a terrible, horrible thing is because of these monsters who are trying to continue to perpetrate the idea that it's a terrible, horrible thing.
I will get to that one in just a moment. The second angle that people take when they say that being raised by gay parents is bad for kids is that the fact that the parents are gay will cause problems for the family, right? That it's not accepted, that they will raise all kinds of issues, and therefore it's a less than desirable home life for the kids. The problem with this objection is there's all kinds of choices that traditional families make all the time that may cause problems for those families, but they choose to accept that they're going to face those problems. And we don't step in and deny them the right to be families just because of that. For example, a parent may join the military, leaving their kids without both parents for some period of time and possibly permanently. And we don't disallow that choice by the parents. And there's all kinds of examples of that. So
one of my favorites, which tends
yep.
to tie to this one, is interracial marriage, because this exact same argument was used to discourage interracial marriage for years. Oh, you wouldn't want to do that. I mean, I realize you love him and everything, but think of all the abuse you'll go through from living in the neighborhood of being, the only black girl married to a white guy, etc.
Right.
It's about, yes, it's true. You may suffer, some abuse and some criticism by your ignorant neighbors, but it's about changing social paradigms and ideas and allowing people to become more accepting of a variety of, choices.
Right. I would also remind those people who raise this particular objection that there is such a thing as child protective services. And there are such things as parents who are actually abusive or who are actually incompetent, and the organizations are in place, the structures are in place to deal with those kinds of problems when they occur, whether the parents are gay or straight. So even raising the specter of, maybe it'll cause problems with the parents, it's not really our business unless the parents are actually abusive or incompetent. And if they are, it doesn't mean you don't let them be parents. It means Child Protective Services deals with it.
And single people can be parents. Just because you're saying they can't get married doesn't mean they're not going to adopt. I mean, Rosie O'Donnell was single and adopted a number of kids.
Excellent point. And finally, this is sort of getting into the territory you were just discussing, and I broke it off as a separate issue, that being raised by gay parents will subject kids to ridicule, right? But we have a phone going off in the studio. Objecting to gay families on the basis that their kids will face prejudice is itself an example of that prejudice. The problem that we ought to be addressing is the prejudice, not the gay marriage, right? You don't make something, you don't justify disallowing some behavior by saying, well, I can't handle it. I can't treat those people fairly if you let them do that. That is your problem to behave yourself, not your right to deny them. Okay, so next major objection to same-sex marriage. The purpose of marriage is to have children. 4% of people surveyed said that this objection was their primary one. Again, even though it's only 4%, practically everybody I've ever talked to about this, when you start picking apart their arguments, will eventually get around to this one. And it is immediately shot down because this objection is not raised in the case of infertile couples or elderly people who want to get married. These are clear cases of heterosexual people who are not going to be having any kids from their marriage, and yet nobody steps in and disallows them.
Yeah, it's not raised in any case other than homosexual.
No, so this objection is merely hypocritical and completely irrelevant. Agreed?
I'm with you.
That's the shortest one. Okay, third objection. Homosexuality is unnatural and or abnormal. 9%. Though, again, you got to think that the people that have a problem with this, ultimately, most of them also think this. Okay, first let's take unnatural. Homosexuality has been documented in many other animal species. It is therefore natural. If what you mean by natural is that it's something that occurs in nature. It's not just because we have, our kinds of technology or society or whatever it is that they want to blame this on. No, it happens to animals that have no such excuse. So that's ridiculous. But to be fair to those people, not everything that happens in nature is necessarily desirable. So those who claim that homosexuality is abnormal don't simply mean that it's uncommon, like left-handedness, for example, right? Only 10% of people, approximately, are left-handed. And gay people, it's 12 to 13%.
And they're weird because they have to use special scissors.
Yeah, and this is a good time to point out that people who were left-handed used to be subject to prejudice.
Oh yeah, my roommate was in parochial school, and they would slap his hand and forced him to learn to write with his right hand.
I didn't know that was going on so recently.
Yeah, and he's 37. So they smack him on the hand, get him to. So now he's ambidextrous. So it worked out good because he can he plays golf left-handed, but he writes right-handed, and he can do things with either hand as needed.
Right.
He's still weird.
So there's the unnatural argument, which is ridiculous because that's clearly not the case. And then there's the abnormal in the sense of undesirable, bad. It's a malady that we want to fix. But a good example of a malady that we'd want to fix would be, say, cancer, right? Which clearly is harmful. And when a person has cancer, you don't say, well, he's just like a left-handed person. No, you say, that guy's about to die unless we take extreme medical steps. And that is why it's reasonable to treat cancer as an abnormality. Being gay has not been shown to be any more harmful than any other uncommon but natural innate human trait, like left-handedness. Now, when AIDS happened, there was, of course, the chorus of those bigots who wanted to leap on that and say, ha-ha, now we have proof that it's dangerous to be gay. But, AIDS doesn't just kill gay people. It's a fluke of coincidence that it happens to be transmitted in a way that it largely affects the gay community, and that does not make that case.
There's another thing about abnormal, and this is just kind of quick off the top of my head. If you're gonna use abnormal in the sense of saying something is bad and necessarily undesirable, that kind of requires a baseline or a goal.
Uh-huh.
You have to have some framework of, for example, you could say that homosexuality is bad with regard to evolution because you are not passing on your genes. You have your particular sexual desires do not afford you the opportunity to pass on your genes. So you could say it's bad if you have that goal. And the question is, what goal are they imposing over this in order to say that it's abnormal? And it turns out that it's an ethical or moral goal, which is kind of infused by about 80% of the population and perhaps less, depending on, particular denominations. And we live in a place where you're not supposed to be able to dictate ethics and moral behavior of people based on your own religious opinions. But
let me bring up another example, I think, that
sure.
that raises this. I was reading an article recently about, I hate to get this wrong, because people who have conditions that cause them to be small when they're adults. There's different technical terms for that.
Various dwarfisms.
And I'm afraid of using the wrong term because I don't want to offend those people. But
dwarfism in little people is...
Okay. So one or both of those things, there's a potential for genetic treatments that would, or perhaps it's just, examining the embryos before they're born to guarantee that the offspring would not carry that trait. And dwarf or small people parents many of them object to the very idea of having their children prevented from carrying on this trait because they don't see it as a malady. And since we don't have the same kind of religiously motivated objection to being a little person, if you look at that as an analogy, it's not at all obvious that those parents are wrong when they say they'd like to be able to pass that on.
Yeah, if we can look at it and easily put it in a scope of, we're looking at the human race in its entirety and what's generally considered normal and what we would generally consider good traits to pass on. But you're really talking about evolution is entirely about small changes over a great deal of time, and there's occasionally some fluke change, and you could make the argument, how do you know that this fluke change of whatever causes, let's say, achondroplasic dwarfism leads on to something which may be better? And that is important because evolution doesn't have a goal. We impose goals over the top of it when we're in discussions about things, but evolution in and of itself has no goal. It's just random mutations over time, and we may have more impact upon that now, being conscious and having some control over direction, and enforcing a non-natural selection, some kind of arbitrary selection, but there's no goal there implied.
Right. Agreed. All right, let's move on to the next one. And now they're starting to get up there. Marriage is defined as one man and one woman. 16% of people asked why they object to same-sex marriage, bring up this little excuse. And that claim may even actually be true of most dictionaries. I don't think that the right response to this challenge, though, is a duel of Webster's versus the New American Standard Dictionary. The error here is the idea that dictionary definitions ought to control our lives. Dictionary definitions change all the time, and they do that naturally as we in society over generations change the way that we use words. So it's actually the other way around. What we do is examined by the people writing dictionaries or how we use words, and then the dictionaries are written to reflect what we do. We don't do what we do to conform to dictionaries. If our culture finds it sensible to expand our concept of marriage to include same-sex couples, then the dictionary definitions will change over time to reflect that.
Not only that, but this isn't just a dictionary definition, it's a legal definition. And even if the legal definition was, in fact, one man, one woman, it doesn't matter what the dictionary or legal definition is. What matters is what the dictionary and legal definitions can be. Because at one time, voter, legally and in the dictionary, was defined as white man. And now women can vote and people of other races can vote. It's about changing things. And this idea that we need to stick with concepts that are 200 or 2,000 years old, that some ultimate truth was discovered back then, they got it right and we shouldn't change anything. To me, that's just patently absurd.
Right. Well, the variation on this is it undermines the traditional family. Right.
Who says the traditional family shouldn't be undermined?
Oh, there's a whole nest of things wrong with this. I mean, yeah, right. There's nothing about tradition. The traditions are no more valid things to point to say that's how we ought to live than our dictionaries. We ought to live the way that works best for most people, I think, right? That optimizes happiness and freedom. And appealing to a dictionary definition or a legal definition or a tradition and saying, no, we have to keep doing like that, is just, closed-minded and blinkered. It makes no sense. Okay. But then, on top of that, there's the whole issue of whether there's some undermining going on. And I still don't understand this one. I'm not gay, I'm married, and my wife and I are not going to get a divorce, and our family is not going to fall apart if our next-door neighbors are gay and are able to be married. There's just no level on which that makes the slightest bit of sense. I've been on the show before and asked callers, please, if you can explain to me how it's going to hurt your heterosexual marriage if other people who are gay are also able to be married, please call in and explain that.
I mean, yeah, you could have, like, for instance, next door neighbors, two gay men who've been living together for 15 years and go off and secretly get married. You wouldn't know it. It wouldn't affect you. So why is it suddenly different if they're publicly and legally allowed to be married? You might not even notice if they didn't invite you to the ceremony. You don't have anything to do with them filling out their taxes or their insurance forms or any of the other things that are affected by marriage. So, if you have some reason, if you're out there and you think that gay marriage is a threat to your heterosexual marriage, please call in and explain why.
I have a theory here that I'm going to step in with and state sort of bluntly. I think that what people mean when they say it undermines the traditional family, where they're coming from is this. They are saying they don't know how to live unless somebody writes it down for them and gives them specific instructions. And as soon as the instructions get a little more complicated, they're afraid they won't know what to do. And the problem there, again, is the people that won't know how to live if how you ought to behave depends on what your sexual preference is in your marriage. The problem there is ignorant people and not gay marriage. Okay, so now getting to the big fat number one cited reason why people are against same-sex marriage and the reason why we're talking about it on an atheist show. Marriage is a sacred institution. Homosexuality is morally wrong. Homosexuality is a sin. The Bible says you shouldn't, or it's against my religious beliefs. All those things, all these religious, obviously patently religious motivations that against same-sex marriage, 45% of people surveyed that object list that as their number one consideration.
And I think, to me, that's a little bit encouraging because I was worried that the number was going to be considerably
way higher than that. Well, I think there were 8% who didn't want to say.
Oh, well, I think we can add them to that.
Plus, of all these other groups, I just can't imagine people that are bringing up, that all people who bring up these other excuses first are not also seriously motivated by their religion, right? They just think, oh, well, I got to make a good argument, and I know that my religious argument is full of holes.
Yes.
So
I can't say Jesus told me that gay people should burn.
Because you look like a lunatic.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, the premise that heterosexual monogamous marriage has always been sacred to the Judeo-Christian religious tradition, even if you believe that premise is false. The early church considered marriage a tainted earthly institution and didn't even declare it a sacrament until the year 1215, which is centuries after the founding of the Catholic Church. So that's just ridiculous. Plus, you look in your Old Testament, you have your plural marriages going on. It's just silly. And it's clear, if you read a lot of the Bible, marriage is considered it's like a trade deal. I get the woman and you get the sheep. It's that sort of thing. In any case,
I could have picked something slightly different, because that one's kind of amusing. I get the women and you get the sheep. I'll take the women, Jeff can have the sheep. No, the other thing is that the Apostle Paul is, in the New Testament, is incredibly against marriage in general. His position was, you don't go near a woman, don't have anything to do with them, you should remain celibate.
Or something? Or praise those people that have made that decision?
It would be better to be a eunuch than to give in to the lust. But
right.
I think Paul was a little nuts myself.
So, but that's really all beside the point as far as I'm concerned, since I don't believe in the religion, and I just think that's silly in the first place. The real deal is the Constitution requires our government to maintain a neutral position with regard to religious beliefs. The government has no obligation to criminalize same-sex marriage just because your religious beliefs say that it's not good. Your religious beliefs are irrelevant and a non-argument. Now, the government, of course, could criminalize same-sex marriage if it had compelling secular reasons to do so. Like, all these other reasons that we talked about before we got to the religiously motivated one. And if there was a religion here in the U.S. that considered gay marriage a sacrament, but it was incontrovertibly true and proven from a secular standpoint that same-sex marriage was bad, the government could prohibit that.
Right.
They do that kind of thing all the time. But examining these other motivations, and of course callers are free to call in and try to explain to us what the actual problem is with same-sex marriage. Lacking any compelling secular objections to it, there is no reason to make this be against the law.
Why don't we pause for a second and take one call real quick and
Okay.
come right back to this. We've got, is it John?
Yes.
Hi, how you doing, John?
Hey, fine. I've called in a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering, man, you got a wide conversation there about, you got feedback. I can barely hear.
Yeah, you might want to turn down your TV if it's up.
No, I got mine on mute.
Okay.
Anyway, about the same-sex marriages and atheists, how do you do that?
Excuse me?
Same-sex marriage and the philosophy of being atheist.
What do you... I'm
Okay,
not sure
what's
what your
the question?
is.
Well, my question is that do you believe in a higher power?
No.
No.
So when you die, you die?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you too, dude.
No.
Yeah, when you die, you die.
Well,
That's pretty much a
it's just-
tautology. That's definitely true. Now, you might claim that your invisible soul rises up into some heaven, right? We don't believe in that part, but even you know that when you die, you die.
Yeah, well, no, that's what I was asking.
So you don't die. You're immortal.
No. Well, yeah, no, I agree with that, but
Okay.
I'm just saying that.
We still don't understand your question. Why? You're right. We don't believe in a God. We don't believe in an afterlife. What's your question?
So what happens? I mean, the guy on the left here, I'm watching the TV, and is that what you tell your kids?
I don't have kids, but if I did, that's what I would tell them I thought. Yeah.
Are
don't
you
be-
suggesting that we should make up something to tell our kids to keep them from having to face the uncomfortable truth?
Well, on the guy on the right, and you're a nice-looking guy there. I'm not
Thanks.
gay. I was just wondering, do you have kids?
Nope.
Well, I'm just saying you don't believe in a higher power.
No.
Okay, well, no, I'm not trying to rag on you.
No,
guys.
I'm just trying to answer your question quickly so you can, we don't want to keep repeating the same question. So what is it exactly that you're having difficulty understanding, and we'll try and answer it.
Well, why do you rag on the Christians or other people that believe in that?
Well,
I
right
mean, why
now,
are you on
Here, well, I'll explain why. Roughly 12 or 13% of our population are gay, and right now there's a religiously motivated movement to criminalize the act of marriage among people who are gay, and to us that looks like it's simply making laws to enforce prejudice. Because we don't see any good reason, we don't see any valid secular reason to criminalize gay marriage. And the people trying to make that happen, the people trying to criminalize it, are, by and large, Christians. That's why we're criticizing them at the moment.
Okay, well, no,
And at any time that...
And it's not even a matter of criticizing all Christians. We're criticizing actions that people take on behalf of their beliefs.
Well-
You're free to believe, and I support your right to believe whatever nonsense you want about afterlives and deities. It's when you start acting upon that belief in a way that affects me or other people, that's when there's an objection. And I don't know why that would be, confusing to anybody. Because
Well,
if you
no,
look back
I'm
a
not-
couple
I'm not-
hundred...
I'm not saying that.
No,
I was
but
just
if you
saying
look
that-
back a couple hundred years ago, when we had slavery in this country, it was being supported by Christians, by religious people. It's in the Bible. I mean, it's not like God says don't keep slaves. There's specific instructions in there on how to keep slaves, who you can enslave, and how you mark your slaves, what you pay for your slaves. So to claim this new modern Christian claiming that, all that slavery stuff got pushed away when Jesus came, that's nonsense, because even a couple hundred years ago, people were using the Bible to justify slavery. And it does. There's nothing in the Bible that says doesn't keep slaves. So 200 years ago, if we'd had the miracle of television back then, I'd have been on a TV show talking about how these moronic people are using their Christian beliefs to enslave an entire race of people.
Oh, yeah. Well, you go back to Rome and everything else.
It's the same thing now. I believe that they're violating the basic human rights of a particular group of people based on a religious opinion and a pretend morality.
Okay, well, I appreciate you guys having me on the call.
Oh,
and,
thanks a lot.
Well, I just want to get a viewpoint.
Okay.
I'll probably call you guys next week.
Cool.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
So, yeah, and we were going to get to some of that soon. You've got more on that.
Yeah, here's a quote from the President of the United States from yesterday when he came out to, officially, finally, like everybody didn't already know that he was in favor of this, officially, finally proclaim that he wants there to be a constitutional amendment prohibiting same-sex couples to marry. Quote, "Ages of experience have taught us that the commitment of a husband to a wife to love and serve one another promotes the welfare of children and the stability of society." I don't have really any objection to that sentence. I think that's basically true. I think that's a good thing to have a husband and a wife. I don't think that necessarily makes it... I certainly don't think we should have a constitutional amendment forcing any single parent to get married again just to make that happen. But he continues, "Marriage cannot be cut off from its cultural, religious, and natural roots without weakening this good influence on society." Now, how does that make any sense?
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
And when I read this, it actually made... See, normally I don't talk about strictly political things. I mean, we definitely try to stick to issues, and I wouldn't generally try to attack all Republicans. And even on this show, I've never specifically gone after, the president. I might go after some politician who's done something. But in this case, this to me demonstrates just how moronic our president actually is. Because he said cultural, religious, and natural roots. Now, first of all, there are no natural roots of marriage. Animals don't get married. You can make an objection and say, well, that there are examples of animals cohabitating and being monogamous, but that's not what we're talking about here. Even if this ban goes through, homosexuals will still be allowed to cohabitate and be monogamous. We're talking about specifically marriage. There is no natural heritage of marriage. It's an invention of man. It's a legal position, primarily for financial reasons, at least in these days. And so that grounds upon which the president is requesting Congress to ban this is completely irrelevant. The
Religious.
Cultural...
Oh, you want to do cultural next? Go.
Oh, yeah, I got to say
Sorry.
religious for
You're
last.
on a roll, man.
The cultural argument that he's claiming is also irrelevant because you're talking about a specific culture, because there are plenty of cultures that allow homosexual marriage and it doesn't cause their culture or their civilization to collapse. So you're arguing for specific cultural, which gets to his claim of religious. His culture that he's talking about is based on his religion. First of all, it is illegal, a violation of the First Amendment, for him to make an appeal to Congress based on religion, asking them to make a constitutional amendment. Hey, we need a constitutional amendment to preserve this religious opinion. That's illegal.
Right.
And even if it wasn't, it doesn't speak to all religions. There are plenty of interpretations, even of Christianity, which do not vilify homosexuality. There are plenty of Christians who, when they read the Bible and come to their own interpretation, they say, hey, it's okay. God made us all different, etc. We're not going to get involved in that because that's not an issue with what we're looking at within our religion.
Right. The government needs to remain neutral on religious questions. The government has every right to examine secular considerations, right? And to go ahead and criminalize things on the basis of valid secular concerns.
When
But
the
there
president,
just aren't any on this issue. There
Yeah.
aren't.
you know, they haven't even done the investigating to find out if it's possible that they could come up with it. What we have here is the President of the United States standing up and making an appeal for Congress to create an amendment to our Constitution based on religious reasons. That's absurd. That's not the country we're supposed to be living in. Now, I apologize to those people who happen to be, you know, fans of W. And, you know, while I wouldn't necessarily go after a specific party, I was given this today, which is the Report of Platforms Committee for the Republican State Convention in Texas. And these are still issues. I'm not saying, you know, there are plenty of things in the Republican platform that I would probably agree with. But they start off in the preamble, among other things, by saying, we believe that human life is sacred, created in the image of God. Life begins at the moment of fertilization and ends at the point of natural death. All innocent human life must be protected. Now, you're talking about a political party whose platform right off the bat is acknowledging and deferring to God. And the fifth one in there is that we believe that traditional marriage is a legal and moral commitment between a natural man and a natural woman. And boy, aren't they getting specific about that language now. We recognize that the family is the foundational unit of a healthy society and consists of those related by blood, marriage, or adoption. Now, you know, let's throw in that adoption exception because that one's already gotten through.
Yeah. I'm gonna step in here with a potentially argumentative comment.
Okay.
I don't care if a political party makes a big deal about a particular set of religious beliefs. I don't really mind, because a political party is not the government. But as soon as that political party comes to power, they ought to be restrained by the limits of the Constitution, which
Right.
insists that we shouldn't be making laws or changes to the Constitution without solid secular justifications. The religious motivations ought to be completely irrelevant, and the questions ought to be resolved purely on the basis of reason and evidence once they are in power.
Yeah,
because that is what the government is supposed to be limited to.
My point for bringing this up is that if there are things within the Republican platform that you happen to disagree with, they're worth considering to find out if that party is representing your ideas and what danger there is of them enacting some of this. Because if you continue through their platform, they have statements on, is it on P11? America is a Christian nation founded in Judeo-Christian principles. We affirm the constitutional right of all individuals to worship the religion of their choice. So they're having it both ways in that one. But the idea that America is a Christian nation is a lie. It is utterly and completely false. America is a secular nation, and we've been over this, I don't know how many times, and the arguments get, you know, tossed around, and, well, this founding father said this, and this founding father said this. In the end, it doesn't matter what any of them say.
It kind of depends what you mean, because if all you mean is most of the people in this nation are Christians, well, yeah, that's like, you know.
But this says
bluntly
founded
true.
on Judeo-Christian principles.
Right.
Which
now
is
you've got a problem.
false.
That is false, and but you know what they're sort of dancing around there is what they really, I think, want to say, which is that America is a Christian state, right? That it's not just influenced by Christians at the beginning and not just mostly Christians now, but somehow intended to only do exactly what their Christian beliefs say it should do, ever. And that's just not true.
And I only had one last comment on this Republican Party platform for now, because I haven't read all of it, but I found this particularly amusing.
Okay.
In the promoting of individual freedoms and personal safety under religious institutions, the platform says the church is a God-ordained institution with authority separate from government. We call on Congress to sanction any foreign government that persecutes its citizens for their religion. However, it doesn't call on Congress to persecute or to take action against our own country when it persecutes people for their religion. It's only foreign countries we're worried about. Yeah. We can do whatever we want. You want to? You got something to hit on that? Or?
No, let's do calls.
All right, let's go on to James. How you doing?
Hi, thank goodness.
Hi, James. Thanks
Hey.
for hanging on the
Y'all
line.
fell for John because he didn't ask you the question. He said, do y'all have children? He didn't want to ask you, are you gay or heterosexual?
Yeah.
You see
Yeah,
what
we're
I'm saying?
both straight guys, which makes it a little embarrassing to talk about stuff like this. I mean,
I know, but I'm 75 years old. I'm
Yep.
a gay man. Came out at 56. I lived as an asexual till then. All this theory of people being pedophiles, I was a packmaster for 3 years with young kids and a manager of Little League for 13 years. All the parents say, hooray, thank God you had our child. Anyway, getting back to the subject of what we're supposed to be like, I've got friends that have been together now 56 years in the same relation. Not played games or nothing. I mean, they've hit it straight the same way. When I came out at 55, I went through counseling prior to that for a year, then stayed in counseling for 3 years trying to figure out, well, God, what's wrong with me? I've come to the conclusion there's not a blank thing wrong with me. I've learned to approve of myself and love myself, and I stayed with my partner, the first one I ever had, until he died of not AIDS, but ALS. When you get ALS, you become almost like a newborn child. You wait on them, hand and foot, you spoon feed them, you clean them, the diaper, almost changing them. I'm wondering how many people would dump him in a nursing home. I didn't. Straight people, I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to look at one thing here. You always hear the saying when you got people talking in, particularly on these shows, oh, let's go make love. Love is a 4-letter word. What they're saying is, let's go have sex. It's a 3-letter word. It's smaller. So what holds a wedding and a marriage together is the 4-letter word of love, not the sex, if you think of it.
Yeah.
And people don't look at it this way, and this is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and
There's so many
they're
things.
trying to perpetuate this idea that homosexuality is all about a particular sexual penchant and not about love, that it's impossible for two people of the same sex to love each other. And if they really thought about it, they'd realize that that's completely absurd, because there are plenty of heterosexual peoples who have incredibly strong loving bonds with people of the same sex. Just because there's something in addition to that in a homosexual relationship, that seems to me to be beside the point.
I know there's things that annoy me, too, about gay people, is what we want to say out in public. I don't like what some of them do, and I don't like what a lot of heterosexuals do.
we don't either.
And I think it's rude, and it's groping somebody that's as animalistic as you can be, to my own opinion. And I don't know, there's a lot of things I could get in the subject and hang on to y'all for the whole show. Really, I went through it. And finally one night, I got hold of a female that I talked to a long time ago that was a psychologist, and she says, you know one thing? She says, you've learned to do one thing in your life, and that was to learn to love yourself. And you have to do that to become a person of whatever sexual orientation you feel. And to me, if I can love myself, I can learn to love someone else and give them that love. And this is what I'd say. It stinks when you got people out here that's making judgmental calls, because I would like to ask the question, how many, I own a home. And I know the older people talking about to own their homes. Blank to blank, we pay school tax. We pay city tax. But I know a lot of them that were teachers that caught flack for being a gay or a heterosexual person. But so why the guy, I was sitting there been trying to find somebody besides who I know, the same a lawyer or somebody, say, let's go back and file a lawsuit, say it is discriminatory against heterosexual people to have their say-so, teachers and all this and that. They pay tax. We pay the same tax they do, but we don't have the same advantage that they have in your insurance coverage. And if you die, you got parents. I know a young couple that been together for 21 years. They both died of AIDS. Beautiful, beautiful people that gave to this city. But when one of them parents found out what they had, the home, all the stuff in it, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine. The heck with the other one that was still alive and in the hospital. Wow. And I mean, you see so much rudeness, and people don't understand what gay. I hate the word gay. Homos go through. Anyway, a feeling that you get annoyed with, and this is why I can see, I love Rosie. She's got a very beautiful attitude, but this Ellen DeGeneres, whatever she is, I don't like her. So she doesn't.
Yeah, I think some of that kind of comes down to personal opinions and stuff.
And
Yeah.
I mean, no, she's got an attitude that here I am, I'm better than you are. Rosie looks at you. You accept me for who I am, and I'll accept you for who you are.
Well,
And there's a difference in it. And I see so much out that way that a lot of y'all don't see that I do. But thanks for putting this on.
Thanks, James.
And
you
I
very
think
much
a
for
lot
the
of
call,
this,
sir.
when one of these days, not in my lifetime, but maybe in yours, they're going to find out what came on. The estrogen that is produced when a woman carries the fetus at a certain period of time is what makes you gay or homosexual or whatever you want to say, and it's been proven. But they don't want to believe it. And I'll let you go.
That could be the case. Thanks, James.
Bye-bye.
thanks very much for your
If
call.
if we get more science along behind that, then that's something we can.
Yeah, I'm disturbed by the idea of. I've read a great science fiction novel by an author whose name I can't remember. I'll remember
Before
in
you
a
do
second,
that, I
but-
need to
yeah.
invite James and anybody else, any atheist or atheist-friendly people, welcome to join us at dinner after the show at Threadgills on Riverside. We're finished here at 6 o'clock and get there between 6:30 and 6:45. So, James, if you're able, I know we've invited you before, and any other atheist-friendly people who'd like to join us, there's the address there. The science fiction novel.
Great science fiction novel about a corporation basically invents a procedure to prevent the birth of any more gay children. Just the idea of that even existing creeps me out. I mean, that I completely understand the little people parents and their concern that their condition is being viewed as an aberration that needs to be stamped out, and as soon as there's a technology to do it, that will happen, and no more people like them will exist anymore. I don't know what the right answer is. I'm just deeply disturbed by it.
I don't either, but if you think about the flip side,
Yeah.
we're living on a planet where population is rapidly becoming an issue, where resources eventually,
Yeah.
it's just a fact. It's not comfortable, and not everybody agrees on when, but someday the population is going to exceed the ability for the planet to sustain it. So it seems to me that if you could do a little gene manipulation and make sure that 50, 60, 75% of your population were homosexual, and that was culturally okay in marriage, and they had all the same rights, that all of a sudden you could keep population expansion under control and still maintain a healthy civilization. But maybe I'm nuts.
Yeah, knowledge is probably. I mean, I'm generally of the opinion that knowledge is always better than ignorance, but I'm concerned about what our culture would do with such knowledge now. Shall we go on?
Yeah, sure. We've got, I believe, Joe Zamecki.
Howdy,
Hey,
Hi,
Joe.
Jeff and Matt.
Sir.
Good to see y'all on TV again, and once again, great show. Love this show. I tune in every week. I can't wait for this Saturday at the Gay and Lesbian Pride Festival at Waterloo Park. I just wanted to say that again. I heard you say it before, but it's a real good thing, and I think the gays and lesbians and atheists have a lot in common, as there are a lot of irrational religious claims and
Well, as we know, we're more hated than them now.
Sure.
So they might kick us out.
Yeah, certain studies say that we are the number one, but
Yeah.
anyway,
But
it's,
there are a lot of groups in the United States and around the world who have been incredibly dumped on by religion, and we look at those folks and wonder why it might never have occurred to them that there might be something wrong with their religion.
right, and the religious aspects of these arguments against it, against gay marriage, are really irrational most of the time, and I think the Old Testament shows it very clearly, but a lot of Christians have embraced the idea of civil rights for homosexuals in a very liberal way and forgotten what some parts of the Bible have said about it, and if they want to really be honest with themselves, they're going to have to reread that, because God certainly did say that he wanted us to execute anybody who had gay sex.
Hey, I'm all for dishonesty from Christians when it comes to them throwing away the more barbaric parts of their own religious holy book.
Yeah, I just wish they'd take the
I'm all in
step,
favor of that. Yeah, I wish they'd take one step further.
chuck the Bible completely. Keep your modern Christianity, which doesn't conflict with anybody else's rights. Worship on your own. Enjoy it. Teach it to other people if you want to. Just chuck the whole Bible so that somebody you recruit into your particular fantasy doesn't get led down the primrose path to extreme fundamentalism and is out picketing with Fred Phelps.
Well, there you go, and I would agree with that. It's best to pick and choose. If you have to have any of it, I would always say just leave the bad parts alone, please. But also, another reason that some people have come up with against gay marriage that I've heard, I don't think you mentioned, was some people have said that it would increase or raise the divorce rate in America. Now, what's odd about that is that when we talk about the divorce rate, we're talking about heterosexual marriages only. And so it's, what, around 50% these days? A good friend of mine and a very strong atheist named Ron Barrier once said, and I just love to quote this again and again in this argument, is that I don't believe that homosexuals getting married could do any more harm to the supposed sanctity of marriage than what heterosexuals have already done again and again and again in a much larger way. And, of course, statistics show that, like you said, it's, 14% of Americans are homosexual, and so this is a minority
12 to 13
who has not had the opportunity to do the harm that the heterosexual community, the majority, has.
And they should have an equal right to do damage to marriage just as much as heterosexual couples do? Is that what you're saying?
Well, and some people say, why shouldn't they also suffer, too, because marriage can be a pain, but...
It may be that, with the divorce rate around 50%, because marriage is very much, like I mentioned before, a financial institution from both an individual's home and from a community standpoint. One of the things it encourages is, if you're married, it encourages you to have a family and put down roots or whatever in a community and contribute to that community and keep building it. Because for single people like myself, if I lose my job, I can pack up everything I own and move to wherever the next job is, nice and easy. I don't have necessarily have an invested stake in my current community. I might have. And in this case, with me, doing the show and the ACA involvement, I do. But that's not the case for everybody. But marriage encourages that kind of thing. And it may be, as you were pointing out, with the divorce rate around 50-some-odd%, there could be a contingent of people who are afraid that homosexuals may actually show up heterosexuals, that they may be more committed in their relationship and less prone to divorce, and that could end up making them look bad.
I've often thought that that's exactly what would happen, simply because homosexuals have had to wait for years and years and years to, when they do eventually get the right to get married, they will have waited a long, long time. In that time, they, as a culture and a community, will have learned a lot more about how to have a better relationship as time goes by. We Americans, we evolve socially, and they will have had those years to evolve without getting married, without taking that risk, and without having to be locked into something that they, if they make a mistake, they'll have great difficulty getting out of, like heterosexuals have all the time. And so when they finally do, if they do, hopefully they do get that right in the future, I think they'll do better just because of that alone. So anyway, great show once again, and I'll continue to watch. Y'all have a great day.
Thanks, Joe.
Bye, Joe.
Joe is a board member of the ACA and puts out the Atheist Community of Austin's newsletter. And I'm pretty sure that if you go to the website, you can look at all the old issues of the newsletter. This latest one, since I got voted in as president, there's actually a quick note in that one from me about things we're looking for in the future for the ACA as far as increasing membership. So if there are former members watching the program today, you might want to check the website, look at the newsletter, to see if there's things that you might be interested in doing and participating and helping out, especially the Texas Pride Festival next Saturday. Also, for anybody who's been watching the show for a long time and may be interested in meeting people, we have a number of social events, including the happy hour, dinner after this show, and other opportunities for you to meet ACA members and possibly think about joining, contributing. We're also always looking for people to help out with the shows and other activities.
And should we take a moment to say hello to our studio audience?
Yeah.
We have a large number of people. We're not going to turn the cameras on them or anything, but we have a large number of people sitting in here in the studio. Actually, one less, because two less. They just ran out the door for some reason. But
they knew we were going to mention them.
That might be it. But thanks, folks, for sitting in. It's always nice to have.
Yeah, it's good. And any atheist or atheist-friendly person who's wanting to check out the group or participate in some way, and you're also free to come down and watch from the studio and participate in our events. So, as a reminder, and thanks on that.
Okay.
Let's go on to Steve.
Yeah, hi.
Ooh.
I wanted to say something about, you were talking about the people thinking that gay marriage is jeopardizes the traditional marriage. When people start talking about traditional this and traditional that, and you were kind of, I think, mentioning this a little bit, that I feel like there's these days people sort of invent a tradition that fits their current idea of what the world is supposed to be like. And that in the good old days, everything was that way, and it just a lot of times wasn't that way, or at least it wasn't exactly that way.
Yeah, we've got a romanticized version of our history in our head, and I think it's part of like the storytelling tradition and passing on lineage. Because, you know, my grandfather and my dad have both told me a number of things about, you know, their good old days that when you actually go back and look at history books, you find out probably wasn't that accurate.
Right, and the marriage thing, there was somebody came out with a book in the last couple of years about the history of marriage, and I actually didn't read it, but I heard a lot of discussion of it, and I kind of wanted to. Maybe I will now. But, you know, it was about the actual history of the institution of marriage and how what we're familiar with or kind of associate marriage, the way we deal with it, is very recent, maybe a couple hundred years old, if that much. And before that, it was much more of a contract between families, not a lot of choice. The individuals, even the men and the women, didn't necessarily choose as much, but particularly the women. And then if you got down into the peasants, you know, I don't even think they did get married. Basically, there wasn't any kind of legal sanctity much going on in the, you know, the lower end of the population as far as the rich and the poor.
Could you imagine the rough equivalent of one of today's evangelists walking through like the 14th century English countryside and pointing at peasants and telling them they're living in sin because they never actually got married?
You know,
it's just
other
absurd.
Examples of, you know, tradition, like, you know, people speak, we use bad words now. We say bad words on TV, right? Well, go back to, I don't know, medieval London and walk around in the street and see what anybody is saying to you. You know, I mean, my guess is there's plenty of vulgarity going on, and it has been for a long time. I mean, you could come up with example after example, and I think the Christian nation is another one. That the Christian nation is a fantasy constructed out of, you know, I think people sort of look at, gee, since the 60s things have changed, and before that, somehow, before we know anything, back then, everything was in some sort of perfect state and just got wrecked by something that happened recently. And it's just, we invented history to hold up some sort of crazy worldview that people have invented. And, you know, it'd be interesting to write a history. Someone should, a good writer should write a story where, what would history really be like if any of that stuff is true? I think if you actually projected it and did sort of reverse projection historical history, it would be absurd. Problem is it would probably be taken for history, and they'd burn all the other books, and then and future generations would actually think it was true. So,
wow, you may be a little more pessimistic than I am.
well,
that is a cool thought, and it's a good thought exercise. And you know, you see that in other areas where you're doing kind of a, you know, when you're maybe arguing strict logic and you're doing a reductio ad absurdum, where your whole point is to start with a premise which demonstrates how absurd it is. Or you demonstrate through argument how absurd it is, and therefore it can't be true. So
right. And one other thing, when you were talking about divorce, you know, that is one thing. Gay marriage, when you talk about how can a gay marriage threaten my marriage, and basically when people, you know, make promises to each other or vows to each other that they stick with, I feel like that strengthens every marriage. And I don't know whether you've ever had the experience of being married and being friends with a couple who are married who then get a divorce. And even though it doesn't necessarily ruin your marriage or anything, there's sort of a ripple through the, you know, the fabric of your reality that happens, that someone has blown off their commitments, and it causes a disturbance in your own thoughts about your own commitments for a while. And if anything from someone else's behavior has any kind of impact on your own, I would say it's the process of breaching, you know, commitments, not making them. And that, you know, divorce is a thing that possibly, obviously, is damaging to marriages because it's the end of a marriage. But, and it's interesting that nobody wants to make a constitutional amendment that sort of makes divorce illegal. I mean, I guess it would be impossible. It's ridiculous. I'm glad they
there's a lot of religious objection to divorce. And if they had their way, those religious extremists that want to criminalize divorce will go ahead and do it.
But in terms of something that a mainstream person would go along with, the gay marriage thing, I guess, is somehow easier to. I guess it doesn't feel like it's addressing them. So
they got to start with something where they think they might get some traction. Right.
Right.
They want to build up their power base, dig their claws in deeper into the machinery of government, and then move forward with their extremist agenda. I mean, we've seen this in every other nation on the world that has been taken over by fundamentalists. We see how it works, right? It's not an overnight takeover. Suddenly, the fundamentalists are in charge. It's always a slow process where they get more and more and more power until they completely clamp down.
Right.
That's how it works, and that could happen here.
I think this rewriting of history kind of idea plays a role in that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Anyway, thanks for having a good show.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Thank you. We are, by the way, I want to remind our viewers, I'm still waiting for some person who objects to same-sex marriage to call in either to defend one of these lame arguments we've already shot down on the show or provide us with another one that they think is valid.
Commenting on something that Steve said, you've got divorce is common and evidently fairly easy. It's really religion in the churches and perhaps to a large extent society in general that enforces any sort of actual obligation upon marriage vows. From the government standpoint, marriage is pretty much, okay, you sign this paper, you're married, or sign this paper, you're divorced. There's no extra, impact apart from possibly paying child support and other things like that. But as far as you've made this commitment and signed a contract, and this is the one contract, or at least one of them, that you can get out of pretty easily. You can get annulled in a few days. You can get married in Vegas overnight. You can get divorced quick as long as there's not, complicated issues of finances. So it makes you wonder if a lot of these objections. The government's involvement with marriage has nothing to do with any of these. There's no moral or ethical, obligation or commitment on a part of the government. It's just a contract. And if they're going to let you get out of it just as easy, then certainly that's got to be one more argument for the government should have no involvement at all in who should be allowed to get married and who shouldn't. But we've got, is it Brandan?
Hey, fellas.
How you doing, Brandan?
Hey, what's going on?
Well, not a lot.
I am a Christian, and the same-sex marriage thing, I'm not going to attempt to defend it because what I defend it with has no authority with you. So no matter what I say, it's falling on deaf ears.
If you made the argument that the Bible is opposed to homosexuality, yeah, that would carry no weight.
Right. So, I mean, all I can do is just say read the first chapter of Romans. Basically, whatever you want to do with it, that's you.
So,
however,
hey, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
The point we made about that, you certainly have every right to believe that what you think your religion teaches you is correct.
Yes,
right?
sir.
The point we're making is that when the government goes to criminalize something,
right,
the government's responsibility is to make that decision on the basis of, addressing actual problems. And that's why, that's why your religious opinion shouldn't hold any weight in government either, right? If there really is something wrong with gay people being married, then there should be some actual consequences you could point to that people's religious views wouldn't have any effect, right? You could point at those consequences and say, if gay people will get married, that will happen, and that thing that's going to happen is so bad that we ought to disallow the gay marriage, right?
I understand what you're saying, and here's the thing.
Okay.
Same-sex marriages, all that kind of stuff, it's all classified under sin, okay? Sin is lying. Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, you're
Okay,
still there.
I'm sorry. It was a click. I thought you guys were going.
No, I'm not going to hang up.
Anyway, thanks for taking my call. Basically, it all falls under the umbrella of sin. Now, earlier there were a couple of calls that were made, and someone was talking about America and the principles that America was founded on. It is a fact that America was founded on Christian principles.
No.
Wait, let me finish.
Okay.
Benjamin Franklin was a Christian.
No.
However, let me say this. God's plan is not to save America, it's to save Americans.
Okay.
So, first of all, the country itself, okay, America, I don't care too much about America, but Americans, us, the people, that's what God is more concerned for. Now, same-sex marriages, it's clear in the Bible that, hey, God, it's defined as a male and a female.
I
but
thought
like
you weren't going to
I said,
refer to that because you knew it didn't mean anything to us.
Right. But
Can you give us examples of actual problems that will actually occur if gay people get married
yes, sir.
that have nothing to do with the religion?
Yes, sir.
Go
Well,
ahead. Let's talk about those.
okay, the consequences that will happen are the same thing that will happen if you lie, cheat, steal, murder. You will go to hell.
No.
That's
See,
the
now
consequence.
that's not a secular consequence that you can point at and provide evidence of the truth of
What is
that.
your name? What's your name now?
Jeff.
Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, that's not a secular consequence where you can point out the clear, unambiguous evidence that can be identified as true by everybody, no matter what their religious views are.
I understand
For what you're saying to hold any weight, the person you're talking to has to believe that there's a hell and that activity is a sin that is going to send them to that hell. And now we're right back in that territory that you said you weren't going to go to because you knew that didn't hold any weight with us. Right?
Well, this is the thing.
I am all in favor if you can tell me something that is going to happen as a result of legalizing same-sex marriage that has an actual, tangible, real-world result that we can all see.
Okay. Well,
Right? If you can show that's bad, that's absolutely definitely bad, I will be all in favor of criminalizing that thing.
This is all I'm saying to you.
Okay.
You want a tangible, like, if gay people get married, poof.
Well,
You
I
want
mean,
something-
The economy will be
criminalize-
devastated.
For example, we criminalize theft. There is a tangible consequence to theft, and that is people will have their stuff taken away from them, right? That is a clear thing. People, the people have a right to their property, and if we didn't criminalize theft, then their property would be wandering off, anytime anybody wanted to take some. That's why we have a law against it. And by the way, that is why we have a law against it, and not the commandment that says don't take stuff.
Let me jump in here for a second, Brandon, because you made a couple of claims, one being that America was in fact founded on Christian principles, and secondly, that Benjamin Franklin was a Christian. You're wrong. And
you're wrong.
Well,
I
hang on. Don't make me put you on hold just so I can finish. You can look up the information yourself, but Benjamin Franklin was in fact a deist and not a Christian. And some direct quotes from Benjamin Franklin include, "Some books against deism fell into my hands. It happened that they wrought an effect on me quite contrary to what was intended by them. For the arguments of the deists which were quoted to be refuted appeared to me much stronger than the refutations. In short,
also Benjamin Franklin accepted Christ before he passed.
Oh yes, yeah, and so did
And
Darwin.
wait, this is what I'm saying.
Even if, excuse me,
Matt,
but-
listen.
No.
Matt, I don't-
You hold, because that was Jeff who was talking anyway.
I shouldn't have butted in.
There
Go
are a
ahead.
number of comments and quotes from Franklin and from all of the other founding fathers who many people like yourself often like to say, oh, they were Christian. They were, in fact, deists. Thomas Paine was a good friend of Benjamin Franklin's, who he brought over here. Thomas Paine, being critical in the founding of the nation and, in fact, in the naming of the nation, was a target by all Christian religions because of his book, The Age of Reason. It's my opinion, which can't be supported by anything, that a lot of these deists might in fact be atheists if they had the benefit of knowledge such as scientific knowledge of evolution, et cetera, that we have now. But that's irrelevant. When you say that the nation was founded on Christian principles and things like that, that brings along with it a burden of proof, which is continually refused to be met. When you consider the Ten Commandments, for example, only 3 of them have ever been real U.S. laws and are current. So how can you say that we're based on the Ten Commandments? And you get to pick and choose from those things in the Old Testament of, oh, the Bible says that homosexuality is a sin and that those people should be killed, but not a few verses away it says that any unruly child should be taken to the edge of town and stoned to death. We're not going to follow that one anymore. You're picking and choosing, and now you're doing the same thing with founding fathers, making an argument which is also irrelevant, because even if every founding father was a Scientologist, that doesn't have any effect at all on what we can and should do today. And you're back.
Okay. No, I was just simply saying that there was a conversation going on between that, hey, keep your Christian stuff over here and let the government be government.
Yes.
I thought I heard that going on.
Yes, it is. You should not. Your religion should
okay.
not be affecting the government.
Right, I understand that. But every time you reach in your pocket to pull out a dollar bill, there's a mix of "In God We Trust."
Yes, which
That's
was added.
on your.
I'm going to put you on hold again, just because this is important. Which was added in the 50s as a response to communism. Okay. That whole "In God We Trust" as a national motto added to money, that occurred in the 50s, and so did the change to the Pledge of Allegiance.
Though, to be more precise, the "In God We Trust" phrase did appear sporadically on money before then. But the important point is that just because Christians, who are in the majority in this nation, have managed to put their little Christian marks on various things in our country, does not prove that those things really belong to them and that they had any right to do that in the first place.
Yeah, it's an abuse of power we're talking about.
Right.
And just because the Constitution exists to protect the rights of the minority from the whims of the majority. So it doesn't matter if you make everybody, everything, my car, everything, have a stamp on it that says "In God We Trust." If you manage to enact that as a law, there's no efficacy involved in that at all.
Okay. Well, I'll say this and then I'll let you guys go. Because
Okay.
everything that I say my whole argument is on the basis of the Bible.
Yeah,
and
sorry,
you're
man.
Deaf. You're deaf. You can't hear me when it comes to the Bible.
Hang on,
I'll
I'll let you get to it real quick. I'm going to interrupt you because there's something important you said. You wanted me to read Romans 1, and you're talking about how your whole argument comes from the Bible, and you're deaf, and we're deaf. And yet you seem to not realize that I was a fundamentalist Christian for 20-some-odd years and was studying for seminary. If you think that I haven't read all of this and studied it in great detail, you're sorely mistaken. Now, the deaf claim I understand because I have family members who are convinced that I've been deceived and I'm doing the devil's work. But you can't come at me with an argument of, you don't understand this stuff.
say, Matt, I didn't say that. I'm not accusing you of anything. Dude, I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm not accusing you of anything. All I'm going to say is this, and I'm going to get off the phone.
Okay.
All I'm simply saying is I watch the Atheist Experience from time to time, and you guys spend a whole lot of time Christian bashing.
Yeah.
And Christians spend an awful lot of time. Christians spend an awful lot of time giving us reason to do that.
Excuse me?
Christians spend an awful lot of time giving us things to complain about.
Right, and this is what I'm saying.
Okay.
All I'm simply saying is, you're an atheist. That's cool. I respect that. You're not strange to me. You have the right to do whatever you feel, believe whatever you feel. But hey, man, just don't talk about Christians because they believe.
Wrong.
All right. Well,
I'm not talking about
have a good
Christians.
day.
I'm not talking about Christians because they believe. We're talking about Christians because of what they do based on those beliefs.
If Christians,
big difference.
If Christians had exactly the same beliefs that they have now, but were not attempting to impose their religious rules that they can justify only by their belief on everyone else, we wouldn't have a complaint. We don't mind. You can believe whatever you want to. That is a right we absolutely stand behind. We darn well better, because it's the only thing that keeps us alive.
There are some other things, that I would continually object to. The propagation of this myth that it's a Christian nation, the absolutely moronic arguments of saying that one justification of that is because the bill in my wallet says "In God We Trust." You're talking about 150, 200 years difference there, first of all. but this respinning of the founding fathers, if you go back and you actually look at the facts and read the stuff, I mean, there was a recent thing on Thomas Jefferson where they took a bunch of quotes from him out of context to make it look like he was this shining example of Christianity in founding the government, when in reality, Thomas Jefferson chopped up the New Testament to remove anything supernatural, any claim of virgin birth, miracles, or any edicts at all, and just basically had a book of the philosophy of Jesus, and that was his Bible. Now, you can call that Christian, but it sure doesn't seem to mesh with anything that's Christian today. And when you want to try and claim that this is a Christian nation, you can't compare apples and oranges. The fact is that out of the founding fathers, there were quite a few Christians, but God was specifically voted out of the Constitution every time it was raised. God isn't mentioned in the Constitution except at the bottom where it's dated in the year of our Lord. And that's just convention. That's not a testament to any of God's existence or purpose.
I have one other comment I want to make in response to this, this constant pointing out bits of evidence that the founding fathers were Christians. Even if, but it's nonsense, but suppose you could historically establish that in spite of the fact they said they were deists, all the founding fathers were Christians. That argument only makes sense if your premise is that all that a bunch of Christians could possibly do when setting up a government is make a government that is by, for, and about only Christians, right? If that is your argument, if that is what you are telling us Christians are like, that when a group of them come to power, they will make things so that they only conform exactly to what their own religious beliefs say and not give equal right and equal voice to people who disagree on religious grounds, then I darn well object to Christians being involved in my nation's government.
Yeah, the fact of the matter, the government of the United States is secular, and these arguments about Christian founding, this is some kind of arrogant thing of, this was founded by Christians and it's a Christian nation, but we tolerate the rest of y'all. Yeah, well, screw you. This is a secular government. The Constitution specifically bans any religious test for political position. The issues come up over and over again, and what we get is callers and authors writing articles and making accusations saying Benjamin Franklin was a Christian. I don't care if he had a deathbed confession or not. His deathbed confession is entirely irrelevant to what he did when he was working, towards the founding of the country. Even if what you said was true, it's still completely irrelevant. These bad arguments in order to spin a point, which basically is a position of we're better, and this is our country, and I've heard this before, if you atheists don't like it, leave it. No, sorry, that's not the way it works.
Okay.
We got a few minutes left. We can get more callers unless you wanted to
No, go ahead.
pound on the founding fathers or W some more.
No, I'll probably have something to say at the very end here. Give
All right, we've
more
got
chances.
Lance.
Hey, guys.
How you doing, Lance?
Hey, listen, what is the majority of I know everybody's an individual, what does the majority of the atheist community feel about same-sex marriage? Are they for it, or?
We feel that whatever opinion we hold about that, it's got nothing to do with what any God is supposed to have said.
Okay, all right, well, that's fair enough. Do you guys have an opinion about multiple partner marriages?
We've discussed this on occasion because sometimes it comes up as a slippery slope claim that once you allow homosexuals to marry, you'll then allow people to marry dogs or people to marry 20 people, and that argument is just completely
Well,
flawed.
what's wrong with marrying 20 people?
I don't have any problem with anything that any group or of consenting adults want to do that doesn't hurt anybody else.
Yeah.
But that's me. I don't think we've taken a poll of the ACA or.
I'm not sure that I
general.
have good information on the issues that surround polygamy to object to it out of hand. What I can say is that there are cases of polygamy that have gone on in the United States, illegally, whatever, that I would definitely object to because it's part of a society where you've got girls essentially raised to be the sex slaves of the elder men in the organization. And on that grounds, I would object to it. But if consenting adults, same as sex or any other choice. If consenting adults want to get married and have, a four-way marriage, I don't necessarily know that the logistics are feasible to work out from a
But that's
government
their
taxation
problem.
purpose. But if they want to cohabitate and work that way, that's fine. I don't care.
Yeah, I don't really think the government should have anything to do with that. If
Yeah,
10 people want to get married, or 2, or one or the same, or whatever.
I would abolish probably.
I do, however,
marriage.
have to disagree with one of the callers, and I think one of his points was that maybe it would encourage people to stay together if they could get married. And from my own experience and watching my friends and other people, it seems like people can go on for a long time as boyfriend and girlfriend. And as soon as they get married, the pressure's on.
Yeah.
And they want to split up. That's one thing I disagree with. And another thing I have to raise a question with you, Matt. You made a point about go ahead and have your religion, just either water it down or throw it out, whatever. Just how did you put it? I don't want to misquote you.
I said I didn't have any objections to people maintaining their religious belief. I would prefer that those who wanted to keep their moderate Christianity would completely chuck the Bible and just go with, without.
Or maybe line item Bible.
Yeah, well, Jefferson did it.
Right. Well, one issue I have to point to is that a lot of people, they don't openly attack gay people. I mean, they may not agree with them. They don't agree with it. But we do look at one example of how Jesus dealt with someone who was committing what was considered at the time a sexual crime, and they brought a woman to. You know the story. You want to tell the story?
No, go for it.
Well, they brought a woman who was found to be supposedly committing adultery to him, and wanted to have her stoned. And he said to them, "If anybody's among you that hasn't sinned, go ahead and cast the first stone." And he forgave her, and he didn't punish her for that. Now, that's the example that we look to, and not just that we want to water down our Bible, or at least me. I can't speak for everybody.
Yeah, like I said, you could make a list of things Jesus said, and there are quite a few of them that I'd probably agree with, and there's some of them that I think that are absolutely asinine, like take no thought for tomorrow, and God will provide all the food and everything else you need, so you don't need to say
Sounds
anything
good to
or
me.
work. Yeah, if it only worked, it would sound good, but unfortunately, it's really bad advice.
I think I get the point of that statement, but anyway, you guys get a good show. Appreciate the call.
All right,
you.
thanks a lot, Lance.
Okay, bye-bye.
Wow.
So we got like
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Let's go quick, Ed.
Hey.
Hi, Ed.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome.
We
We're
gotta
down
be
to like
quick.
2.5 minutes here.
Okay, well, I just have a quick dilemma for some of these people that believe the way they do, and that is that someday, very soon, I believe they will have a test to see if an unborn child is going to be gay or not. I believe it is genetic. They've done some smell tests and stuff with some things, but
Fair
anyway, so their dilemma would be, well, if their child is going to be gay, do they abort it?
Yeah.
And
Right.
So what, what a strange thing to have to deal with.
Yeah, that's a very good point. A tough question for them.
But you can sort of broaden that dilemma to everything that could be possible in the near future with genetic engineering.
Right.
And it's going to come down to some consensus about the rights of parents to decide things like that for their offspring.
Right.
And that's a whole discussion our society still has to have.
Yeah, but I'm looking forward to the day that they're actually going to be able to prove that it is, in fact.
I think the problem you'll find is that while we're going to discover that it can be genetic, that there may also be social factors, and that you may have different types of homosexuals,
Right, yes.
that are from different factors.
Right, there's a whole range of things. And then the other thing I was going to mention, too, was that, whenever they had this same-sex marriage thing in Texas here, the guy that started, he equated us gay people with being dogs.
Yeah.
And I think that's really sick.
That type of thing happens a lot. We got to let you go. Thanks a lot for
Okay.
calling in. And I know, Chris, you're on hold. We're not going to get to you. We're running out of time. Jeff's got something he wants to talk about. I wanted a reminder. If you didn't get through, you can email tv@atheist-community.org. You can also visit our website for more information. And remember that next Saturday, the ACA will have a booth up at the Texas Pride Festival. What do you got?
I just want to remind everyone that we did ask. I brought up all these arguments against gay marriage and asked callers to call in. I know Christians listen to this show. Not a one of them was able to call in with a single defense of a secular argument against gay marriage. So I hope you all think very carefully about the fact that you may be operating from a position of bigotry.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next week. Join us at Threadgills if any atheist or atheist-friendly people.
Bye, folks.
Bye-bye.